And we're live.
I
Welcome
hear you.
everybody, Fakewhale Live. We have a good friend of mine actually now, John Karborn, also known just as Karborn to everybody in the Twitter space and Instagram as well, probably everywhere. Me and Karborn have been kicking around in the same circles of the internet and social media since fucking, 2010 and before. So over a decade, but we actually got a chance to meet in person for the first time in London this past June. So that's a little background between me and Carborn. I would like for you to give yourself a little intro, though, just how you would describe yourself. That stupid party question of like, what kind of art you do?
Yeah. It's almost a dreaded question, I'll be honest.
Oh,
I
it's the
tend,
worst.
I tend to tell people simple things like, yeah, I make circles, or I found out that quite often, most of the time, people think I'm into like laboring and DIY. Like I had a lot of friends that were surprised when I started telling them I do artwork. They're like, man, I thought you were just a kind of odd job dude. I thank you, Jesse.
Thought you mowed the lawn, Jess. I thought
Yeah,
you.
man, yeah, totally. Thank you, Jesse. It's really nice to do this with you, and I'll give you what I've got on this chat. I think it's nice to talk properly to someone like you about what's going on. So I look forward to this. I started early on my Amiga and BBS. Pre kind of internet, roaming the internet, roaming the early kind of online world, doing naughty things. Where's Anarchist Cookbook, printing dodgy CDs to sell at school, that kind of stuff. And I really got into building websites as like a 10-year-old, writing code. And, I got hooked, and very quickly I had to make images to go on the website or modify them. And bang, from there, I was really getting into making images on machines. And that's never stopped.
What
So,
when was that? Would you say like from the sounds of it, Anarchist Cookbook, printing off that kind of
yeah,
shit? They're talking late '90s, right?
exactly. Yeah, sort of 97 onwards on the internet. Before that, on sort of BBS and like
Yeah.
yeah, Amiga
What's
stuff.
BBS? What do you mean?
Like dialing up
What is it?
directly into kind of like Ware's background, like privately run
So
servers
that's like a
machines.
pre-internet thing?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting, man. So wow, yeah, you definitely predate me, I guess, within like the internet,
Yeah,
whatever you
man.
want to. What was it back then? Was
I
that
mean,
still
we were
like the
booting
internet
around
or?
on. I mean, yeah, we were booting around on like Amigas, which were kind of cheaply available in England, and every kid had one. We were handing around floppy disks with like rave music on it, and crazy visuals, bootlegging games, and then you kind of quickly get drawn into these kind of dial-up numbers where you could go in and really slowly download, documents,
Yeah.
images,
Okay.
like art, like all that stuff. And that I was, that blew my mind. I was, wow, there's a
It's
whole underground listening to
yeah,
Prodigy,
that sounds
you
yeah,
know.
no, exactly. It sounds like the movie Hackers,
Yeah,
because
it
hackers
was
like that.
exactly that.
They go
That's
in the phone booth to like check in.
right.
Well,
Um,
fucking awesome.
so I mixed all that with kind of listening to Aphex Twin and Prodigy, and and like films handed around on VHS, and I really just got drawn into that pink underbelly that you found. You thought, oh man, there's so much here that you can't get anywhere else, and it's so exciting.
Yeah.
Straight away I saw, wow, the internet's the future. That's it. I'm going to get in there and have fun with it. So I set up the Karborn.com website in 2001, and started putting
Wow.
it on
Yeah.
there. So I've been running it for 20 something years now. That site, putting
Wow.
up like that. So a long time, long time. And then Tumblr
Yeah.
came along, of course, and kind of gave us a lot more visibility again after that sort of dip when everything seemed to get very serious on the internet all of a sudden. And we had somewhere like Tumblr suddenly to kind of put work out like you and me, getting into. Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah. I remember those early days of Tumblr. It was funny. Maybe we can get into that. Can we back up just a little bit? Because I would love
Well,
to hear like pre even that, like what was your childhood kind of like, or like is there anything that would make sense leading you into this kind of interest of yours or anything? Don't want to dwell into it or anything like that. I just find it somewhat interesting.
yeah, totally. So my dad makes electronic music. He was a kind of early sort of proto punk electronics guy called John Fox. That's his stage name that he worked under. And he was kind of making records with Bomb the Bass as well, like when I was a young guy. And he was always kicking about with his synthesizers and his early Apple computers and various machines before that, Commodore 64, which I got my hands on, which was actually my very first machine when I was like a kid, like a 5-year-old, 4-year-old. So he had a big impact there, and he was a real kind of, yeah, they were punks, for want of a better word. They were the sort of smart punks that kind of came out of the, like, you know, fighting, drinking style of punk. They evolved into the kind of operating punks, like
Yeah.
you know, where Brian Eno came from, where all that kind of thing
Yep.
came from.
Yep. I was gonna
So,
say Brian Eno, and now it all like I had thought to ask you this earlier today, and I was like, I know he's got something interesting there. His dad did something, and then when you were talking, I thought Brian Eno, and then I remember we talked about this in fucking Miami. So glad
yeah,
I asked. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
really proper lead in then.
Yeah, I mean, he was, I think, one of the first people to work with Brian as a producer, in fact. And, you know, he had a
Wild, man.
really rough warehouse that my dad bought and made up in East London as a recording studio. And it was, you know, very popular among kind of many recording artists in the late 70s and 80s as well. So he was a real kind of key guy. I mean, even Aphex would talk about him as being an influence. You know, Gary Newman will often say, you know, John Fox is my kind of
Really,
number one influence. Yeah. And
really.
they were good
Wow,
friends growing up, you know, as well. So
that's
he had,
huge.
he was an artist, you know. He had some commercial
Yeah,
success, but he had a great success among kind of other artists at the time, and he was well
which is
received.
yeah, yeah. But both of us can identify with that. I think a little bit. Artist.
Yeah, 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 right.
Right on. So, jumping forward again, I guess you're, you
Yes.
know, hacking and shit in the, you know, the 2000s and whatnot, and then Tumblr came around and everything. What about like your music background? Yeah, that's another part of this, right? That fits
Right.
right in. That came around at the same time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, I grew up in the sort of just at the tail end, really, the jungle drum and bass kind of thing. And in England, that was massive. It played in with, I think, in many ways, with our kind of feeling of the internet. It was like you could do it at home, you could make a hit record, you could reach out to the world from your bedroom. Really, you could get out into the city and cut dub plates or buy the tunes, and there was a whole sense of this kind of exploding, dangerous, you know, subculture which went around it, which of course was why that kind of music was used in that film Hackers, you know. So they
Hmm.
connected dots there quite early. Not that I think that's the best film in the world or anything like that, but what they did do was they did make those links that were really, really happening. And I grew up very interested in sound systems and dubs, and jungle and drum and bass and garage, you know, and obviously that later into dubstep and grime and all that stuff. So I was really keen on, as you can see, some of my records kind of behind me, my
I
archive.
love it. Yeah.
So I got a lot of exclusives as well, like special cuts made for me that I used to play on sounds and stuff like that, you know, and I did
Wow.
that anonymously with my friends. And you know, it was rough stuff, warehouses and outdoor raves and, you know, kind of illegal parties as well when we were young. And that was what you did. It was kind of the thing. And it gave you a sense of independence, and it gave you a sense of kind of getting organized as well and working with people, you know. And you had to get equipment there, and you had to know how speakers worked and how you didn't blow someone's head off and stuff like that. So yeah, so it was, and I got into DJing at the same time. So I would do, like, I had VHS tapes and Edirol cameras and video mixers, and I would go when I was just 16, 17 to do VJing
Amazing, man. I mean,
festivals.
that's like that's the romanticized version of like all that like I always you see in the movies, and then you know like that's the romanticized version of like London, UK,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that. I mean, even like the movie La Haine sounds from like within all that kind of structure and stuff. Very
I hope slightly
yeah,
less violent than Lane, but yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Totally.
slightly, yes, yes. But the way
You
that that's all been documented is so romanticized. I love it. Yeah, yeah. But Hackers is such a dope movie. But that where does Hackers take place? That's in America, isn't it?
That's in the States, yeah, totally.
Yeah, not that it
Contract
matters,
hosted
but
by
yeah.
Great British Records. So,
Yeah, no, I mean almost entirely.
yeah, yeah. They,
No, I don't. That's not. No. You know who else though that I'm thinking about now is like Danny Boyle.
yeah,
Wasn't he like yeah
yeah,
a big part of that kind of scene too? Like his movies were influenced by that a lot.
absolutely. I think it became a kind of DNA that, you know,
Yeah,
that mutated our DNA. I mean, you see guys like Burial, you know, and
yeah.
think in many ways, me and him probably have many parallels in how we feel about certain things. And at the same time, we were reading a lot of books by guys like Mark Fisher, J.G. Ballard, like really kind of quite hard-looking British writers that wrote about the future, but with this weird sense of nostalgia for things that never happened, or all these utopian ideals of the internet and technology that kind of crumbled, and you'd watch it all collapsing. But that's part of the fun. It wasn't that we always thought everything had to be good or like sweet and color candy or anything like that. It was meant to be kind of dark and exciting and illegal and fun, you know, and exciting. And I still feel that. It's, you know, I feel that again with some of the things going on in whatever you want to call crypto art or whatever. But
absolutely, yeah, definitely. We definitely wanted to tie it to that, because I think both of you and I similarly felt that probably coming into the Web3 space was like finding Tumblr for the first time. For you, maybe even earlier. I mean, it did feel also for me like AOL for the first time, which is like my first experience with the internet, because I come from the middle of fucking nowhere, like farmland and shit. So like the first time I think I heard about the internet was probably getting an AOL CD in the mail randomly and being like, what the fuck? Yeah, pop it in. Okay, Dad, give me your credit card. You know,
yeah, man.
get
Yeah,
signed up for this shit.
I
But
would
it
spend all my
reminds me
time
of early
getting.
days and the potential, right? It's like you feel that same kind of potential. Like once you realize a little bit and you start pulling on the thread and it starts unraveling, you see a bigger picture, like, oh shit, it just gets like the potential you see is more and more. And that's what's most exciting. And I think that's what I felt when I first got on the internet and I was illegally downloading songs for free. I was like, shit, that's amazing. You know, like
Maybe.
this is everything, you know? And then when Tumblr started, it was like, oh wow, now it's like aesthetic community or something had happened in a way of exposing the artwork that hadn't been before. I
Yeah.
was like, holy shit, this is a whole nother one. So I mean, it was like the advent of the internet, the advent of Tumblr, and then Web3.
Yeah.
What do you think? What's your timeline there?
Yeah, man. I think essentially as a teenager, there's a point when you suddenly realize there's a really big fucking world out there. Sorry, should I watch my language? I should a bit, shouldn't I?
No, not at all, dude.
Right.
Fucking, I'm gonna be ripping a bond here in a bit. It's not like swear away.
Good. So I think like as a teenager, suddenly you realize there's a big world out there, you know, and you have to access it. And for many people, including myself and yourself, by the sounds of it, that technology gave you the chance to kind of start to unlock the door, you know, thinking, oh wow, man, people can interact or look at what I'm doing in Mexico or in India or in Australia, and I'm here. I can be in my bedroom, like hacking and crashing away, playing with things, putting them out, and you think, yeah, man, like all the barriers are down. You know, well, can I reach out of space next? I mean, it's it kind of
when you're like sitting in the middle of nowhere and you're making things happen on almost like this global scale, like I've told this story so many times, but I was getting record labels to send me like infinite amount of CDs because I had a website that reviewed them, and I was like 14 years old in like farmland, like in a town of 700. But my mailbox was full of records or like CDs from Sony, Epic, places in the UK. It was just like, this is unbelievable. You know, little 14-year-old brain is just like, whoa, you know, like all of a sudden the world just got a whole lot different, all because of like that computer and the internet. Sorry to interrupt, but like totally relate.
Yeah, man, reach, you know. And I was the same. My parents kind of took me out of the city when I was about 7, 8, and they split up, you know. And suddenly I was in this very remote kind of middle of nowhere outside of London. I felt very isolated, and I didn't like school. And, you know, my only interest then became in basically kind of hacking the school networks and finding other people there to kind of get into some really mischievous digital stuff with. I mean, in some ways it's lucky we didn't get caught, because I'm sure some of the things we did that if you did them now, you'd potentially be in big trouble. But what it really did teach me was I realized that there were all these people out there that were able to independently produce things and reach audiences. You know, you didn't need a label anymore. You didn't need a platform even. You could get out there and you could build a website, and you could go and talk to people, and you could spam them on ICQ or AOI or reach them in forums, and it brought everything to life. And that's, you know, that's so exciting to a young person that feels isolated or trapped at any point and has a lot that they want to kind of do. And the more you dig in there, the bigger it gets. And I'm still digging and it's still getting bigger. So it's, time goes on, but in some ways the essential feelings don't really change. And the sense of excitement, it ebbs and flows, but there are points again like now where I really feel even more excited about what's going on than perhaps I even did then, which is amazing for me.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of my friends seem to kind of almost lose their way in life a bit sometimes, and not that we all don't sometimes, but I feel really pleased to be such a kid freak geek that dug into all that. It feels like it gave me a lot of reason in life, and in there I could get away from school because I could learn things and I could try things out and I could build a life for me. I mean, even when I was 17, I did the kind of first Nike website as a 17-year-old, and they paid me a few grand, and that was a credited project. And I was like, school's like, you don't want to come back? I was like, not really, mate. I was like, I'm off now. I'm sorry. I'm doing these jobs. I've got money. Like, you just put petrol on a fire.
I've got the proven skills now. Like,
all I needed was some finance, and now I can get in some real trouble, So that starts to come, and you think, oh well, that's it. Gloves off, let's really have fun with this. Yeah.
We're the lucky ones that made it through. I feel like it was a gauntlet. I feel like this now, like, is kind of the reward that you and I are receiving on some level for like not giving up all that time, because you said like a lot of people lost their way, but like, I just spoke with Mark, guy with the most likes, the other day as well. I don't know what order these are going to come out, but we were talking about the reward system of social media being so fucked up forever, like not like being non-existent, actually, like being like the reward system's actually more work. You hope to get another job like by post, like you're never appreciated, and that can just really crush you and make you be like, well, fuck this, like I'll do something else. Like, totally. And I think a lot of people did do that or do that, and saw a lot of people fall by the wayside. But there's a few of us that it's funny, I feel like made it through the gauntlet. It's so funny to think of it that way, but like in my own head, like, there's a number of artists that I've known kicking around since the Tumblr days, early on 2010, before that I see now in the Web3 space. And like, it's always one of those, like, we all have the 1,000-yard stare or something, like if we would see each other at a party, we'd do just a silent nod, like we all made it through, we're all a little traumatized, but we're here.
Yeah, totally. A little beat up. Yeah, definitely.
So like, I would like to, like, your own personal path through that. What has it been like? Because you're an artist, like, to get a little bit more specific about your art, that is like a, I don't like the term jack of all trades, but you're much like me, where you're just an image maker. It doesn't really matter what form that takes or what medium it takes. You're just like, I want to make interesting things. And it seems that you're always trying to push yourself in your practice to do things that you either haven't seen before, or the way that I talk about my practice is the way I push myself is by always trying to entertain myself. And the only way I'm entertained is by seeing things I've never seen before. You seem to be almost the same. So I would just love to know more about your practice, the forms it's taken throughout the years. I do remember you even saying in Miami at one point that like you were working purely digital and then actually started working physical from there, which is a little backwards. So maybe you can give us a little run through of your, and you made the Nike website at 17. So like, it sounds like there's a lot here. Yeah. Run us through it.
Yeah, sure. I was, in some ways, I was a sort of technological utopian idealist at heart in some ways. Like, I just made the work to make the work. And for a long time, that was quite simply the case. I would work doing whatever I needed to, usually doing kind of creative direction or working on shoots or finding any ways to bring money in so that I could get time to go back to doing what I was doing. So I've been a fairly kind of constant image maker all of that time. It wasn't kind of very profitable making digital work till recently, should we say? So
unless you got the jobs, like that was all about getting the jobs, the Nike website, the whatever.
Yeah, man. So you had to bring in a job. So I would do kind of campaign commissions for Oh, I don't know, man, fucking everything, like, and I would go work in freelance and agencies. So I figured if I'm freelance, then I can do a couple of months. I can take all the good stuff, like learning how to pitch, learning how to build ideas, structure strategies, all this stuff. So I would work on kind of big decks campaigns as well for like Adidas or whatever. And I only stopped doing that
I
about
love how you guys say Adidas. Adidas. Sorry.
Adidas.
Yeah.
And
Sorry to interrupt.
no, 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 and I only tomato, and I only I only sort of stopped potato, and I only stopped doing that about 5 years ago, really getting away from it. But I was in there to hijack to make some money, but I was in there to hijack all the techniques of big business, big creative business, man. And there was a lot that you
With
learned
like
building
destroy the
decks.
system from the inside.
Yeah, totally, man. All the best operators do. You go in
Mhm.
there, you take all the knowledge, and you leave with it, really. And I always felt advertising was this big vampiric force anyway that just rinsed everyone and every idea and packed it up and sold it. So I was very aware of this, and I really saw how 20, 30, 40 are the biggest for everyone from Ogilvy to, like, man, I went there, and I really went in there and took everything of value in the structuring of how you work on those projects with me that I could, basically. And at heart, I think, I started off as an image maker, very much the kind of last 10 years, and particularly more and more, I'm a conceptual artist. I wrap
Mm.
ideas in images and otherwise. I'm always looking to kind of use kit in ways it wasn't intended to be used, and
Mhm.
to make work that I think, like you said, feels like it's missing. Like there's something there that everybody missed. Like the good ideas are the ones that
Bam. Yes.
I should
Well
have done.
said. Something
I,
missed this. Yes.
it makes sense. So in many ways, I'm a dark pop artist. I'm not afraid to say it. I am a
Oh, I
kind of
love that.
artist.
I love
Really.
that analogy.
But I'm a dark pop conceptual artist. um,
Wow. Yeah, that's really well thought and like said. And like what you're saying about the concept being a conceptual artist is really great because like I never like in my own head I'll consider myself a conceptual artist because I know how conceptual my work is, but then somebody asks me like what my work's about and I'm just like and it's like some bullshit I say and it's like fuck that like
you
and
won't get
then
to
so I have
saying
a
it
hard
often,
time
man.
well
Like I only
I
say it
have
in
a
these
hard
conversations. I wouldn't say it loud.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I have a hard time calling myself a conceptual artist, but every time that this conversation comes up and it's me and Sky Golpe in the same conversation,
Yeah,
and I say like that I'm not a conceptual artist, or else I won't say I'm a conceptual artist or whatever. He always is like he'll stop me or interrupt me, and or at the end of me talking, will always be like, "You're a conceptual artist." And so like I get what you mean because even to think in the way that we're thinking just in general, regardless on what the end looks like, is conceptual in itself, right? To think in that way is conceptual. To break tools, like you're saying, use things wrong, whatever, is conceptual in its very inception.
yeah,
I think that I often don't think of myself as a conceptual artist because my imagery can easily be printed on and we share this
yeah,
on clothing, on a skateboard, which we've actually
totally.
been both printed by the same company.
Yeah,
So I've been told my entire life, you're an illustrator by the fine art world, being told I'm an illustrator
yeah.
actually. And then I'm
Thank you.
like, well, shit, I'm definitely not a conceptual artist then. If they're
Yeah,
calling me an illustrator, that's as far as from conceptual artist as possible.
yeah,
What the fuck am I now? Like, I'm a conceptual illustrator. I like dark pop artists. What do you think about all this shit that I'm saying? Because we share this. Like, this is great. This is really
yeah.
rich.
I think as a matter of survival for a long time, we used the word illustrator. I did at points use it
I never
myself.
did though. I never wanted to, man. I even went to school for illustration and afterwards because I didn't want to really be an illustrator.
Not
I would
totally.
never call myself an illustrator. But then like even a friend of my old gallerist was like, "What are you doing with Jesse in the galleries? He's an illustrator. He's
Yeah,
great. He's amazing, but he's an illustrator." And like he told me that and I was like, "What the fuck, man?"
yeah,
Like
yeah,
felt terrible.
yeah. It's. I mean, I respect illustrators very much, but I realized about 10 years
Me
ago
too, me too.
I wasn't one. And
Well, if you
it
think conceptually like we do, and then you try to minimize it into illustration, it's kind of like a diss, even though we like illustrators. Not to interrupt, but
yeah, totally. I think it's there are some that are a master artist. I think if anything, illustrators quite often, it's one of the roughest roads to go down. You're essentially a service provider for somebody else. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like that's unfortunately where a lot of illustrators end up. There are some that can break through that and get through it. Like I used to love doing record covers, man, but how little money you get and how much you get kicked around quite often, it's so hard. It's so hard to do it, and you can't do it as a living. You can't do it as a living,
No, you'd you could not make a living doing record covers. There's a reason that the music industry, that most record labels have their own in-house team to do all the record covers, is because they don't want to pay people for that shit at all. All.
Totally.
Dude, and I love that you brought up the record cover thing. This interview is gonna be full of tangents, but I just went through it, bro. I just took on, like, I'm not gonna say the name of the band or whatever, and I doubt they'll ever listen to this. So it doesn't matter.
I don't say it.
But recently I took on a gig of doing a record cover, and it was only because I wanted to. Like, I was like, oh, you guys always have shitty record covers. I'll do you a solid here. I enjoy your music enough, blah, blah, blah.
Good luck.
And I fucking send them shit that's like awesome, really well thought out. And they're just like, oh, this isn't like what we had in mind. It's like, what you had in mind sucks. Like, that's not, what the fuck is happening right now? And then it was just like, oh, this is why I don't do this anymore. I'm remembering it all. Fuck, what did I do? What did I do? So anyways, dude, when you say that, it's just like, oh man, you really do get kicked about. No offense to musicians either, but like a lot of musicians don't know what is a good record cover or what's going to be a good record cover, or, like we do. That's why you come to us. Like, we study this, you know? So they're like, in the end, to have them be like, oh, we don't think, it's like, why'd you come to me? Like, just let your record label do it then, bro. If that's what if you're not going to trust me. Totally. Anyways, sorry, that's my tangent.
No, I feel you. Like you're expressing I keep that stuff under the hood, but I feel exactly the same. And it's a shame.
I keep it under the hood too, man.
With music, man. I like music. I want to do with music, as much as possible. I found as soon as you were doing record covers, you were a service. And when you're a service,
and they treat you like it. They treat you like it. They're like,
you're being told what to do, and it's tough to get through it. But you learn a lot.
I even wrote my friend. I was in Miami when they wrote me back about the cover thing, and I wrote my friend who's in the music industry and whatever, and I was just like, I'm literally never doing record covers again. Like, I'm not gonna do it again. I probably will, but it was just one of those, like, I remembered, fuck that. Like, it's just not. You wish though, because how many times have you passed up an album or passed by an album maybe at first because it had a shitty album cover, and then later on you're like, this is great. Like, fuck. Like, they really fucked that up. Or like, how many times have you seen a great album cover and it been a shitty album or whatever, and you're always like, I want to get this right, but then you try and you're just like, I see why this happens. I see.
Yeah, and I kind of feel that's the territory for great designers to really nail it as well. I almost feel like, as an artist working on record covers, you're kind of already almost doing a disservice to the really, really great designers out there that need that backbone for the presence of their practice. As artists, if you think like of yourself like that, I think you want to try and be moving away from that if possible, even just out of a sense of respect for all the really great designers. The hours and the huge amount of time to really making what I think are quite often the best record covers anyway. So it's interesting one. I mean, like I did a series with the New York Times a couple of years ago, right? And that was sort of one of my last big illustration jobs, and that was about New York Times in the future, like New York Times time traveling.
Yeah, what was this called again? Let's talk about this project. It's a great fucking project. And when we were in Miami, actually, who was it that? Oh yeah, my friend. I had a random friend that was in Miami doing production, and I told her I was with you. She came and met up or whatever. But before, and she's like, oh, I have one of his prints, and she was a huge fan of this series that was in the New York Times called
Op-Eds from the Future. Yeah,
Op-Eds from the Future.
Opinion editorial from the future, basically. And that's the sort of place where I felt like an illustrator and an artist at the same time. And that was one of those weird sort of rare moments where you're like, yeah, that's great. That was really, really good fun, and it made sense. But the amount of times you really feel it is fun and it does make sense. In the end, I've kind of left pretty much all client stuff behind a few years ago. I just say no. It's a shame in some ways, but I realize, man, the feeling of working on sculpting your own projects ground up is kind of too much for me to resist, so
it really is. Yeah,
that
I found now, honestly, that like the best projects are ones where it's like little, you've never heard of this band or person before, and they're like, we don't even have a budget, we have like $500. You're like, can we do something? And then you're just like, and they're so stoked, and like, you know, the album, some raw, whatever. Those are the most fulfilling at the time for
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, same thing.
I make stamps for my friends' tiny labels for free. That's what I do now. And my only contingent is they have to be stamps. I have to stamp them, and I'm gonna make one on the stamps. And I do the stamps, you know, and I love doing that.
What do you mean by stamps? Like, are you
Like
carving the
actually
stamp or?
like stamping, like cut the laser
Oh yeah.
stamps and stamp them by hand. And I do that anonymously just for the fun of it, because I like the process and I like doing stuff with music, but I didn't want all the bollocks of dealing with any of that. So I just do it in my own playful way with rubber stamps now that I make.
It's a real shame that the record industry and the visual art industry doesn't mesh as well as we would like it to. It really doesn't, though. It's a real shame.
Musicians are now really on the back foot, I think, and you know their income streams are really fucked, and they, you know, man, even sort of middle like successful bands and artists, they've all got fucking second jobs most of the time now. They're you know,
absolutely
musicians, and how they're going to put $3,000 into a cover, and even then when it's a month's work, you know, you're still tough on that, and that's a lot of money to go in record covers, as far as I understand it. So
well, yeah, it is, but it's also like it's not enough if to pay an artist to like put enough work into an album cover, even, you know what I mean? Like $3,000 to pay an artist, if they're gonna artist is gonna put enough work into it as well. It's not, you know, paying that artist enough for their time either. I mean, 10 hours at $30.
Yeah,
like that, I put more than fucking 10 hours into anything, you know, like
sure.
So, you know.
Yeah, no, it's tough, and I feel it for the musicians, but yeah, there you go.
So like, speaking of though, like, and sorry to divert because we were in the middle of like your life story kind of, but like I just spoke with this French DJ named Etienne de Crécy. Have you heard of him? Crécy?
Rings a bell. Yeah, rings a bell, man.
He was early days with like around in the Daft Punk time, I guess, whatever. He said like, oh, I never was that big, blah blah blah, but he seems to have done all right for himself. But I don't know if this interview will come out after or before that one even. But he had an interesting point, because I was wondering about how can, or actually I was thinking a lot about when I first came into Web3, how can this NFT thing benefit independent musicians the same way it's benefiting, you know, us artists?
Yeah.
And he was like, the technology for selling music has already come. It was MP3s. He's like, he didn't say NFTs aren't for musicians, but he basically was just like, it doesn't work. Like, there's no point really for NFT music, because it's already, there's MP3s for selling music that work wonderfully, and their music should be fungible, really, I guess, right? Like, it makes, because everybody should be democratic. I guess everybody should have access to listening to it. And then he was like saying how people complain about the Spotify model, but then he compared that to the CD model. He's like, if somebody bought your CD, they would buy it one time in their entire life for $15 at this point, or $10 back in the 90s, whatever, versus a fraction of a penny every time it's streamed forever. He's like, which one's worse? And I was like, I've never really heard these, but they're very sensible. Why is the music industry in such shambles then?
Well, you've got, what's funny is back then, at least for your money, you had something tangible that you could hold on to. I mean, the trouble with kind of paying Spotify and paying Apple Music and even renting films on Amazon is there's nothing for you to kind of trade with afterwards. So you can't take it to another streaming service, you know, you have to buy it again and all this stuff. So other than kind of Bandcamp, where I see the artists like independently selling their MP3s, which is a great model for them, there has to be some different structures that will come forward for musicians, and it is only a matter of time. The trouble is, it probably suits the labels and the managers to keep it in the old way, because, you know, there's a lot to do with kind of who's in control. And I think the musicians, a new generation of them, will definitely be waking up to working in new ways. And in the same way, you know, we had to work in different ways as artists between traditional methods and digital methods and put all that together. Musicians will be coming forward, a new breed that will be using visuals and they've been on their way up forever. It's always been coming, and they will come and they will recognize the value in what they do, and they will be smart enough to build these kind of living communities and exploit or use the new technology. I think I've even seen a few guys like Def Beef and a few others kind of knocking about, starting to make some really interesting stuff. And you can see underneath it all, they're just a bit slow because they've been pushed down by by the music business, which is one of the roughest, nastiest, dirtiest businesses in the world. Like, if you think the art world's bad, the music business is an animal, you know. So
all business in general is fucking bullshit, like all of it. But then the thing that I think is so shitty when it comes to the record industry and like the art market and shit like that is like artists to me are the only pure profession there is in the world almost, right? I mean, maybe like chefs and stuff like that, but like artisans, and then you mix the artisans with this really, really, really fucking corrupt business stuff, which is like, just keep that on Wall Street, keep that at Google, keep that at fucking Walmart, whatever the fuck. But then you bring it in with the artists, and it's like, oh fuck, now you're fucking. It's like it's just wrong, man. That's why it feels so fucking terrible. It's like, because for me, it's like I'm always putting my best foot forward, only trying to do the best work I can, never trying to screw anybody over, always trying to pay it forward. And then people are fucking me constantly, trying to take advantage of me and stuff like that. So.
Totally, man. It was even recently when I saw the kind of big royalties discussion going on. And then I started really thinking about, like you're saying, I like the kind of ethics and the shared value of artwork, trying to put work out there that's as good as it can ever be, and making sure that you only hand over to people really good stuff that over time, as you keep working, builds for them as well. So you create what I think is an ecosystem, an intimate ecosystem between yourself and everybody that holds your work, and that's really where, as kind of artists, like this kind of, making artworks, whatever they are, we're very lucky because people are starting to kind of understand this, and all this new Web3 tech and stuff. It's really being tested and roadmapped with artists. We're the guinea pigs that are getting thrown into it, which is great because I love being a guinea pig.
It's wonderful.
Throw me in, it's
well,
why
I hate, usually I hate being a guinea pig, because you get like testing out like a new drug. I don't want to fucking do that shit. But when it comes to this, like, this is the best case of being a guinea pig. But and we are. I've heard that actually many times, that the artists were just, and I shouldn't say just, but artists were there and ready for the taking. It's like it was the unexploited market that was still there. Like music was exploited, everything else is kind of exploited, but visual arts has not been exploited digitally and monetarily yet somehow. Like, we're like, oddly enough, I guess it would take the internet maturing to a certain age to even get to the point of being able to do that. So here we are. Lucky us to be here.
Totally. I mean, and when you realize, the massive kind of consumption of imagery that goes on Instagram and everything else, and really that's the value of it. Everybody's making this great stuff, and so we could kind of, escape those models because we had all.
And I think, I think it was coming on like the cultural zeitgeist. This idea of monetizing the visual artists that are on social medias, because there's not a fucking chance in hell that I just organically came up with this thought, but I've had this thought in my head for 5 years now, of just like the idea that if every like was somehow monetized to a fraction of a penny on Instagram, because I was getting thousands and thousands of likes, and then doing this math on the calculator of like, what if that was literally a quarter of a penny? And then all these likes added up, and that was this amount of money, and then I got that much per day, I would be making a living. This needs to happen. This is going to happen. And then I started seeing other weird payment forms come out. But then I saw what happened was the idea of this subscription-based service of Patreon and stuff, which came out around 3, 4, or 5 years ago. So maybe I was thinking about that even first. But then I saw the Patreon model come out and was like, this ain't it. Like, that's not like the freedom that we're looking for, because now you're just beholden to your subscribers and you have to deliver something to them constantly. That's not what fuck that. Like, I don't want to do that. And then I saw, a few years later, here's Web3, here's NFTs, here's like, whatever. It's not exactly the fraction of a penny, but it's something. And we might actually get to the point of the fraction of a penny for, likes on Instagram or something. Who knows what it looks like, but this, I feel like, is an incarnation of that. And that definitely was on the cultural zeitgeist for like the last 7 years.
Yeah, it's transmission of value, isn't it? And if you've got people that are engaging with work, then the way I see it is, and I kind of always did, was first off, the main thing to do as an artist is find people, is to get the work out there and find people. You don't almost even worry too much about selling it at first, because it's going to take you a long time to make something good anyway, really. And and you got a lot of learning
We
to
know
do.
that now.
Yeah, we know that
that
now. We know that now.
We might have
And
not back then.
totally, and it lets you cut your teeth. You find out what images hit, what images sync. It's, again, back to just being to music thing. Get what all the guys would do in the dubstep, and why I got so many dub plates behind me is, you would make a new track, you would cut it that day, a one-off, like on a lathe, and then they would take it to the sound system and they would play the tune. If the tune worked, they knew they'd take it further and they'd do the pressing and they'd put the thing. If it didn't, they'd move on, work on the next tune. So in the same way that we use Tumblr, it kind of let us cut our teeth and learn what hit.
Like, so they would bring it to a club actually and like play it for an audience?
Yeah. So
fucking brilliant. That's fucking amazing. They're like, let's just see if it works real quick. Dude, that's the exact same thing as like the feeling of back in the day of early Tumblr of just like, I'm gonna put like, is this good? I don't know. Like, did you have that feeling too?
Yeah,
I used to all the time. That was my testing grounds at first, before it was as serious as things are now, where it's like when I put something out, it's like adding to my portfolio almost. Back then it was just like, do some shit, scan it, throw it online, like, oh shit, that got 100 reblogs. Like, let me do some more shit like that. Like, oh, what was that? Like, what happened? It was a whole new way of testing. But that's the same exact thing of like, cut the record, just throw it out there, play it, see if it happens, see if it gets a response.
Yeah, it's great.
I always kind of had an issue with that. Excuse me.
Yeah, no.
Internally, because I never wanted to make art for an audience, and I'm sure you understand that as well. So like, but there's a difference. I feel like what we were doing on Instagram or what we do on Tumblr, because to me at least, it wasn't okay, now I'm going to accommodate that and just like give up on everything else. It was just like, oh, I see. Let me see, why did they like that, and let me modify that into this and that and that and that and that and that and that. It just made sense to the practice. It was like going to art school and going to a critique. It wouldn't, like, if you didn't take any advice of the critique because you didn't want to make for an audience, that would be ridiculous, So it's the same thing when you put it on Tumblr and you see the response.
Yeah, man, totally. You're not just running for popularity, but you're also open developing what you're sketching on. Sometimes
and that's
and
exactly what I think the dynamic is, where it's like not about the popularity. Yes, you hit the nail on the head with that word.
So a lot of work I do, I know it's never going to be proper finished pieces. They might be digital sketches, it might be sketches, but I put them out there because they add into the sense of the big piece that may come from them later. So it's also part of the storytelling of leading into pieces. And when you see like a reaction to something that you're putting out and you begin to go deeper into the idea, especially quite often as I do, I've been planning for a while anyway. I'm just using them as lead up to kind of get you there, because that's the campaign of building up a piece, which is something I'm really aware of. It's not just, oh wait, hang on, I look to sort of how I get to put in that top totem pole of that set of stuff out, and the key piece, the one I really get behind, will be the one that sits on top of that totem pole, and underneath that is all these like sketches, bits and bobs and tests and things that I might put out on social media or on the website or whatever, and then sort of begin to see and get people thinking and anticipating where I'm going to crown that thread, So it's a lot more than just popularity testing. You're just watching and leading up into things as well. And frankly, we all need encouragement as well. So when you see something hitting, it will encourage you further into it. And sometimes at the beginning it doesn't work so well, and you realize there's things that need to change, and you've got the confidence to kind of go at it until it does work. And then when it does start to measure properly and people get it as well, that's useful to know too. So you've got a lot of kind of dynamics that goes into showing work on the internet without trying to sell it all. And that's great, because you don't have to run the rigmarole of doing that print necessarily or anything. You can road test it with a little cost to yourself, and that's important, because you can put more out, be less kind of worried about basically bankrupting yourself with something that doesn't work, and you can work your way more gradually to building like top drawer pieces. So there's a lot in there for artists to kind of.
Bro, I love that so much. Like I think. I think like you should have a master class on how to show art on the internet. I think you just said that, but I wrote that down. How to show art on the internet. because like I think you said there's many ways on how to like show art on the internet, and
Yeah,
it
man.
is, the internet gave us like a whole new, dare I say, canvas for expressing ourselves. Where I just brought this up the other day too, but in an interview in 2018 in Juxtapose, actually, I forgot the exact question, blah blah blah, but the interviewer said in response to something, they were like, it appears as if you use social media as part of your practice, that it's
Yeah,
not something outside of your practice, that it appears as if you use it within your practice now,
exactly,
and that's exactly it.
exactly,
And I
exactly.
was talking to Mark the other day too about how like Instagram stories are like, I love that everybody can see it and respond, and that's great, but that's mostly for me. Like I
Yeah.
go back and watch my own Instagram stories and see things and tie it all together. Like I love Instagram stories. Like I wish I could have like a billboard somewhere that just fed my Instagram stories to it, and it was just a constant art piece that was just out in the world of my Instagram stories or something. Because it's like a live journal, and I love it so much. But I use it for myself, and I gain so much out of it. So like using social media within your practice, do you feel you're doing that as well? Then, I mean, you just said as much.
Man, absolutely. I think I think kind of what we really do is a sort of trans-dimensional storytelling. Like we
Just to humbly put it, trans-dimensional storytelling.
so yeah. So we use social media, we use GIFs, we use still photographs, we use painting, we use screen printing, we use Instagram stories, we use Instagram posts, we use Twitter, blah blah blah. And what we're really doing is we're threading the narrative of the pieces across all of these things at the same time. So I think when the piece is kind of good and it's solid and people understand it, it's because you've taken the time to lead well into it with all of those things running at the same time. That's how the artwork comes to life, isn't it? It's more than just the picture or just the GIF or just the whatever. You've kind of brought people into the journey of it, and that trans-dimensional quality comes across the different mediums and the different things that you express it through. And that's the difference between sort of traditional artists who kind of, for want of a better word, hate or dislike what goes on in the space, and people that begin to look at it and go, hang on a minute, there's a really interesting way to lay work out and to lead into pieces and to make work come to life, and bringing it to life is what I think we're doing here. It's using all those tools to make something interesting that isn't just trying to show yourself on the beach or with a cocktail or that's all right sometimes, but you're trying to make experiences on the internet that anyone in the world can access at different degrees. Big collectors can buy expensive pieces. People can look at for free at home on their phones. Maybe even young students, artists can engage with it. They can feel, they can see it, they can understand it.
Well, that's definitely happening. You
Not
probably
hidden,
get a lot of those emails from the students. Do you get the emails from the students?
mate.
I get a lot of
All
emails from
the time,
students.
all the time, and I take the time
All the
to
time.
respond to them, write back to them.
Do
There's a few
you?
PhD students that have like talked extensively about my work in papers and so forth as well. Some
I
lecturers
just
use
did
it.
an
I know.
interview for USC is doing a paper on Web3 shit, actually, University of South California here,
Yeah,
really reputable and I did that. But I get a lot of students writing, like wanting to do interviews, and it's like I have a hard time always having to like talk about my shit, especially when I do this kind of thing. I
yeah,
feel really bad. Like I should come up with like an automatic response. Not that's much better, but hearing that you respond to them all makes me feel like an asshole. So thanks
I,
for
I, I do it.
that.
I do it very directly, and when I'm in the mood. Sometimes it's also just filtering a few links through, like that I think are good. It can even be suggesting a few things to look at. Some of them talk to me over time for years. Some of them pop up. I send them one message. They don't even reply. They vanish. But I still feel like I've done what I should have done there, And I do personally take the time to reply to pretty much every single message, even on Instagram, that I get. It's something that,
What?
yeah, man. It's something that I always like. I always thought I would. I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to be like that. And it can be really time consuming, especially when
Bro,
it's.
you have clearly have you not run into like a crazy, like I shouldn't say crazy
Oh
person, but some
man,
sort of
yeah.
like,
Oh mate, like
well, how do you keep on after that? I mean, because I did too for the longest time. I was like, opportunity, every possibility, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you get a few stalkers, you get a few, oh
yeah,
shit, this went weird. Like this is
yeah,
now uncomfortable and I feel and
yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, and you start to close off and I like, okay, no.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I try and deal with those as sensitively as I can, and all the different kind of scenarios that crop up. I also quite like dealing with people in many ways. Like, I don't mind even some of the more bizarre or threatening ones sometimes. But yeah, you learn a lot from people like that, I think. And when you're like yourself, when you're a presence there, when you are a character or an entity, you are out there. You are going to get attention drawn to you, and you are going to get people coming to you in all different kinds of states and with all different kinds of intentions anyway. So I think you learn a lot from engaging with people like that, and they might be useful lessons to take into some of the business, shall we say, of art as well. You get to understand people better, and know how to deal with sometimes devious people.
Yeah,
I
yeah, it's true.
generally find, if I'm honest, people are pretty great. Most of the time,
Yeah.
I generally find most people are pretty good. Pretty interesting, pretty sound. Even if they're just trying to come to you to get something, sometimes that's okay too. We all learn like that. I mean, you must have made so many mistakes when you were a young guy yourself. Going
Oh
about
yeah,
things the
absolutely.
way
So
we
many
all have to
mistakes.
learn. We all have to learn, and they're different from the genuine sinister bunch. There are a few of those, sure, but often it's just people don't know how to conduct themselves, and they're learning. I made shitloads of
It's true.
terrible.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of sad stuff out there, and I feel like of my work, because it tends to be darker, attract some darker personalities and some, like mental illness. I'll say, because I have a lot of mental illness too that I talk about, and I think a lot of those people, and so I attract some of it, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
also like, a few years back, I had kind of some bad experiences, or like, and I got really paranoid about, like,
yeah.
sometimes I wonder, like, when because I've been in like crazy mental health situations, and I wonder what people are capable of sometimes. And if I go too far into thinking about that, I'll be like, okay, I cannot talk to anybody. I do not know what these people are capable of. Like, I don't know how much rope I can give them. So, but I don't want to get sidetracked here with that. I'm like, man, I love rambling on and on about these awesome like pockets that you and I have in common. Because there's few of them, and I think we should run the masterclass on how to show art on the internet. I want to
Yeah.
get back though to, because this all spread from op-eds from the future. That's what we started talking about. And
Yeah.
I want to talk about your work, man. I want to talk about your work specifically and give it the shine it deserves, because you've been doing it for so long and it's wonderful. You were talking about op-eds from the future, and I completely derailed you, but that was a project you did for the New York Times. It ended when?
Late 2019, I think. I'm terrible with dates, weirdly enough.
Right before the pandemic. And
Yeah, it was.
you said it was about like the future of the New York Times.
Yeah, it was the New York Times presenting sort of true science fiction, hypothetical future scenarios. New York's flooded.
Speculative science fiction.
Yeah, but the kind of good kind of science fiction, as I call it, where it comes from that very near future. Like, you can feel it's just almost there, and I think really good science fiction is actually a way of navigating the future. I think everything starts as science fiction. Everything begins as science fiction. And there might be scientists that realize it, and there might be societies and cultures that realize it, but everything begins there. And it's a really great way of thinking about responsibility in the future, of what might happen, and also of trying to kind of check, 1984, George Orwell. Like, there's a great lesson in there about societies that are run by, Big Brother governments. And in some ways, just thinking about that helps prevent that future. It helps challenge the potential of it happening, because people are aware of it, and the future is really made on people's ideas of it. So I think for the New York Times, doing that kind of speculative science fiction is really important. And I'm a big science fiction guy myself. I really believe in it as more than just weird spaceships and stories. That's not what it's about for me. It's about potential philosophies, predictions, thought experiments of where we're going, and also it does make you appreciate the present as well, and you have to look at the past through the present to understand the future as well. So all that stuff is great. So when you see something like the New York Times kind of wanting to play with very, very smart writers, and they were brilliant groups of writers involved with it. You can see everything on the op-eds for the future, New York Times, have a look on there. But it's brilliant, because writers and authors want to do that and look at that stuff. it's a fantastic thing to do. So yeah, that was wicked. That was really good to be involved in.
And that you can go view that now. So everybody listening and watching, like, just probably Google op-eds from the future New York Times, and you find out, because the illustrations were dope as hell. I remember when you were doing them, I was like kind of jealous, like, damn, this is such a cool project, you know? Because
Yeah,
I'm actually a huge science fiction fan myself. And I love what you're saying about it not being just like spaceships and stuff, because sometimes there is that, like, the same shame that you feel about like comic books or something, where it's like people really look down on this and think it's just for kids or something. But when you really read like the good science fiction, like one of my favorite science fiction authors is Ursula Le Guin, and
right.
I mean, her books are like way beyond fucking just like science fiction, and they're any science fiction author is viewing the issues of today through the lens of the potential of the future, and they see the potentials, downfalls, a lot of them, which is like what 1984 is, taking what was happening then and extrapolating and blowing it into this hyperbole of what could happen if we allow this to go on, you
Yeah,
know. And Ursula Le Guin did like a really poetic job talking about, you know, gender, even back in when was The Left Hand of Darkness written, where she like created an entire race of beings on a planet that like in their life went through both, they're all genders and all this stuff, talking about ideas that people are talking about now in the present as very present things. And she's exploring these dynamics, you know, how long ago, but writing about it in this fantastical way in the future on a distant planet of snow and all this weird shit. You know, that's what people normally see on the surface. They're like, future, snow planet, aliens, what, you know? But it's like the most human telling of what's going on now. And also, like you said, all science is science fiction at first, because it starts in somebody's head, you know, in the imagination, in the void, and then has to be brought out. So it starts as science fiction. And a lot of my favorite interviews with science fiction authors or about science fiction in general are about that, in like almost specifically, where it's like drawing the line from, like, remember in that movie, like they thought it was going to be like this, it turned out like this, it was more like that movie, or like, oh, that actually started a movie. I'm pretty sure I heard that story before, where it was like, this thing that exists now that we all use was just an idea in this book or movie back in the day, you know, and like we actually just made it happen, you know, like that kind of thing. And then hearing that a lot of scientists and inventors are actually huge science fiction fans, and that has happened before, like I just said, where somebody might read something and then be like, well, let's make that, we can
yeah,
do that. And the
absolutely.
good science fiction authors are the ones that really understand the potential possibilities, and not just like make shit up, but like can extrapolate from what's possible now, what may be possible, etc. So yeah,
Yeah,
what are some of your favorite science fiction books and science fiction authors?
yeah, totally. So one of the guys I really admired was a guy called Mark Fisher, who sadly passed
I wrote
away.
his name down earlier. Yeah, you brought him up.
He sadly passed away a kind of few years ago, and he not only ran a really great forum called Dogs on Acid, which was all about like looking at kind of dark underground British rave music and everything, but from a really intelligent lens. But he was fascinated by this idea that he called hauntology, which was that ideas for the future actually change the future. So we're haunted by all the ideas of the future that we read in books. So we see the hoverboard in Back to the Future. This idea of the hoverboard begins to haunt people's imaginations of the future, and then begins to become kind of manifest in certain ways. So all, you know,
And
a
now
big
we have memes where it's like, where's our hoverboard?
yeah, exactly. You know, and that's it. You're haunted by this idea of a future with hoverboards, and that's a really interesting thing, because it has the power to
Yeah,
change the future as well. So you've got a really powerful
memories of the
interplay
future.
between ideas and realization, and the
Oh,
seed of the idea can get into other people, and it can live in them, and they manifest it. So it's a really spooky sort of powerful force to fuck around with. And sometimes art does it as well. It makes certain prophecies, or has certain impacts on significant thinkers who may end up becoming people that do
yeah.
change the future from it. So you've got like a really nice interplay of it. And
Well, it makes
no,
me think about like I'm sorry, go ahead, finish.
no, yeah, thanks. I was just going to say the other guy that I really like to read a great deal was another English writer called J.G. Ballard, who wrote things like
Oh yeah.
High Rise, Crash, and so on. But
Yep.
funnily enough, my favorite book of his actually is written at the end of his life, and it's about his kind of reflections and his life experiences, and it's a much sort of more sensitive book, but it's full of really good ideas, and he's sort of much looser in his writing. Oh man, I can't remember the name, off the top of my head. It's
okay. I can find it.
Yeah, it's written right at the end of his life, and it's very much a collection of. It's his last book, and it's very much his collection of his kind of life and recollection of everything that went on, and how he had to kind of get through being a science fiction writer in a world that didn't want science fiction writers, and create an industry to kind of, to survive in, to find ways to keep doing what he cared about. He was an admirable artist, and that it was never easy for him. Same with Mark Fisher. They never found big commercial success until much later. Ballard, obviously, with his books and films, but they had to kind of, survive and maintain as something that everybody thought was a madness. And I felt a lot of similarity with that, making digital art. I remember mum and dad were like, what are you doing? This is such a waste of time. So I learned how to make more traditional fine art because I realized I had to do it to survive. Yeah. and
JG Ballard is go ahead. Yeah, I had to what?
I was going to say they had to do a similar thing. They had to discover and create some ways to survive intact and keep putting their ideas out in a world that mostly didn't want them. Yeah.
I guess that's how we felt too. I guess, a decade ago to a degree, like,
yeah.
But JG Ballard is an author that, like, I like his ideas, but I never, like, I have High Rise and stuff, and like I just don't really like that there's a style to it that I'm just not quite into.
Yeah.
I like the movie a lot, the recent adaptation. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
With like
about
who is that character? Tom Middleton?
Yeah, that sounds right. I confess I haven't actually seen the film, but I knew it.
Oh, you should check it out. It's actually good.
Yeah,
like it's weird and good. But this autobiography sounds good. Like, I'm gonna check this out. It might be more my speed. It sounds like, with the sensitivity you said, it's a little bit more sensitive and stuff. I mean, I think that's what I didn't like about his writing, was kind of like there was almost like a raunchiness to it that was just kind of like not my style.
Me too. I didn't like it. Those main books of his are not particularly my interest. I just ran into them for the ideas. I liked his ideas, but really for me, it was his short and that kind of memoir that set him for me in my head. And it's less his writing, more what he kind of stood for, and his science fiction views. I think Flooded London, and I think he saw things in a very sort of practical way as well, and that's what interests me in it more than actually kind of reading the books or exactly kind of going into them deep like that. I just look at the big surface of him, and that's what interests me in him.
It's so funny you say that, because so many times with like books where it's just like, I wish I could just like have all the knowledge in here without having to read all this. You know what I mean? Like, can I just absorb this book and instead of it? But so a lot of okay. We're talking about time a lot, and you brought something up with the Mark Fisher, and it had me thinking about just like nonlinear time a lot. His idea about like the ideas of like the hoverboard influencing the future of like whatever. And I know like nonlinear time is actually just something you're interested in general, just by like the naming of your pieces and what it even says in some of your pieces. And it can go to like another project that we both been part of, was like Sovereign Skateboards. They printed both of our images on skate decks. They're beautiful decks. I actually have 2 or 3 of yours. I don't know how many you did. 2, 1, 2, 3, but I have some up here of yours because I used to share it. I used to share a studio with the Sovereign Studio guy, or the Sovereign Skateboard guys. I would shoot their photos.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so when Alex moved to Portland from LA, and when he was moving, they got rid of the studio, and they had a bunch of the test prints, like stacks of them, and they put a sign on it that was just like, anybody want these, you can take them. And I looked through them, and I took all yours, all the Karborn ones, and then all mine. So I have a bunch of yours up there. That was it. Nobody else's. I was just like, I just wanted the Karborns of mine. But beautiful. And I believe one of them says like evidence of time travel, right?
Yeah,
am I mistaken? Yeah. So like you're fascinated with this, obviously, because of sci-fi and everything that worked out into your work and everything. How does this idea of like time travel and interdimensionality, transdimensional storytelling just kind of manifest within the subject matter of your pieces, I guess we can say?
Sure. I mean, I like it primarily as a quite sort of fertile soil. I think it lets you get away with things. Like talking about time travel
Like you
lets
can't
you.
do it wrong.
Yeah, well, it kind of it means you can make work that feels like it comes from different periods in time, and also it lets you kind of play with much looser narratives in the work, and you can look at people's desires more than, I mean, physically moving through time. You know, even when you watch a film from the 50s or you read an old book, or these things kind of transport you. You know, that there's a power in them. You can go into different places, you can go into different times, and we do it in our memories, we do it in cinema, we do it anyway. We all time travel to some degree, I think, and it comes across in different ways. And you know, I'm being loose with the interpretation with it in a sense, but I kind of believe that. And in the same way, I see science fiction often as a way to navigate the future. I think as well, time travel lets you imagine how you would feel in very different environments. And as an artist, it lets you play with very weird potential scenarios and make work that can feel out of time or is timeless, or like it's been stolen from the future, or like you hijacked it from pirate broadcast signals, you know, and stuff like that. And those are things that I really like. And it's more like a tonal thing. It like skins the work a little bit, like you're saying with my, you know, storytelling. It's a framework that lets me kind of get away with a lot more than if I didn't put that evidence time travel framework broadly around a lot of what I do. It would feel a bit silly. It would feel a bit. It wouldn't quite make as much sense, you know. So it kind of, yeah, it lets me kind of loosen up a little bit, and it gives people a tone to the work, you know. So I can dip in and out of it as I want. I'm very like sort of selfish and playful. I'll do it when I want. If it's part of the time travel thing, that's cool. Like that's up to me. It'll take different forms. Like it's fine. But whenever I want to lean into it, it's there, and I can kind of I can lean pieces into it. And I like using really old technology anyway, and looking at that stuff, like using it in the future with, you know, analog crossing into digital or digital crossing into analog and all that stuff. It's weird, you know. You're crossing technology from another time, and yeah, that's fun. It makes me feel like a mad scientist, you know what I mean? I kind of have a lot more fun with the technology if I'm pretending that I'm building a time travel machine, you know.
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely, man. And that's perfect.
except for the few people that come to me and truly believe that I have the secrets to time travel. I'm gonna
This is what
say
I'm talking. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier,
it's
man. You got to
happened a few
screen your
times,
DMs.
man. Yeah, it's happened
I
a few
believe it.
times, and like you know, I'd put out some really strange writing about how at first, you know, you need to understand the machines, and then over time the mind discard the machine, and in the end you don't need your body anymore because you can move through
Yeah.
time with the power of mind, and then you're this whole different thing, you know. And I do it quite playfully in, you know, in a sort of dirty way, but sometimes people would really take that very seriously, because I would lean into conspiracy stories like John Titor and Ong's hat. And John Titor was a supposed time traveler that turned up on the internet forums like in the early mid-90s and caused a big stir because he like showed diagrams and said he was here looking for certain parts, and he understood computers really well and knew this certain IBM had a facility that no one else seemed to know. And they began to like put out papers called the Incarnambula papers with PhD doctors and stuff. So chaos theory, all that stuff that played in Jurassic Park, all that, they kind of rode into all that and set up basically a time travel cult. And he said he had to stop it when people started turning up at his house. You know, when they started to work out who it was, he got people coming to his property, you know, thinking that they were there to meet him to go to the future, you know. And and Ong's hat, which was a very similar kind of setup. And a lot of these guys will never really publicly admit their involvement too much in these things, but they laid out what they called transdimensional ARG storytelling. And you know, we've seen different forms of that over the years, but time travel was a big one for that. And you know, we've been watching too many Terminator films and everything. We all had this idea of time travel in the back of our heads, and those guys lent into it. You know, they really played on it, and I want to play with that stuff too because I like it. And you know, being able to kind of implement sort of science fiction time travel stories with the New York Times and all of that, for me it's like a great joy in penetrating this time travel idea into lots of different ways. So yeah, it's a wicked thing to lean into and to play with, you know. And it's important as an artist, I think, as well, to find things that you can kind of own a little bit, not in a selfish way, but that feel part of the background when people look at you and they understand your work. It's like
Almost like a specialist. Like I have a
yeah,
yeah, like a specialist. Yeah. This is like so fun to talk about. The time there's so I wrote down so many things I'm gonna look up later, like this idea of time travel and everything. But it goes like a lot of what you're saying, and I wrote this down earlier, whatever, was about like how powerful belief can be.
totally,
And
totally.
with the time travel stuff, like, so I've played around in my own studio because you realize how weird time can be as an artist when you're in the studio. And I don't know if this is all artists, but I'll get in periods for weeks on end where I really am not interacting with mainstream society a whole lot, and I'm just working. And
Yeah,
then all of a sudden, it's like I'm getting up at 4 in the morning, and because I just don't give a shit about the time of day, it's just like I'm ready to work. And then you're going to bed whenever it feels like it. And all of a sudden, like I went, you take a nap in the middle of the day, and you wake up at 4 in the afternoon, and then you think it's the morning, and you exist for like 5 hours in that mind frame of like, or like wake up really early in the morning at like 3 and be working for 5 hours, and then the sun comes up and you're like, wait a second.
yeah,
I thought we already had the day or something. And then you realize just how weird time can be just when your own perception of it. And then I just started telling myself in these weird times, like, who's to say it's not, like that my belief isn't right and the clocks are wrong, or that every time, this was a fun thought experiment, every time I wake up, I'm in a different dimension, just slightly. Not enough that I would notice. Maybe a piece of paper is just a little off. Maybe a rock outside is just a little different. But maybe the reality I wake up into every time I wake up is just a little bit different. What would that mean? And playing these thought experiments and then allowing those thought experiments to influence the work that you make,
yeah,
to me, is so fun.
yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden you're like, no, no, this is actually fact. I truly believe I'm time traveling now. Like, I've been there. You smoke enough fucking weed, you start waking up at the weird times of day,
Yeah,
you don't interact with people for very often, and all of a sudden you're just like, pretty sure I'm in a different state. I'm in a different dimension than everybody else. I'm like, who's to say you're not? If you fucking believe it, who's to say you're not? I don't know. Is there anything that I just said in that rant that sticks with you?
yeah, totally. As I said, I think it's a mental exercise. It's like a meditation. It's like a way of moving out of the limitations of the body and into these adventures of the mind. And I'm the same when I'm really working on a piece. Like, so now when I'm doing calls with you and I'm doing calls all week, lots and lots of calls and talking to people, I'm kind of very structured and I'm going for lots of walks and getting lots of exercise and so on. When I really go into like doing a piece, I'll be sketching and doing stuff loosely leading up to it, like, in a nice way. But once I'm like, yeah, there's a finisher here, and I really get myself into it. That's about basically removing myself from time, and getting into that feeling. Usually getting up, like you say, 4 in the morning. Staying up later in the night, getting up really early, and only doing that, and not going out, and not talking to anyone, and not replying to my phone, and this way, I can move completely into the space that the piece is and occupy it well enough to make a good one, because I generally find that's how deep I got to go to put a proper piece together, and
Yeah.
that's when time breaks down and you're just there for that piece and there's nothing else. There's not even any history at that point in you and anything like that. It's just you and that idea, and you're the only two things knocking about. And you go in deep like that, and time breaks down, form breaks down, your body breaks down, the whole thing, and you become, and your mind, I think, just become that piece.
Beautifully said.
Yeah,
Beautifully said. And there's so few people that understand it, like how, like, so many friends and relationships in the past have been like, like, people get angry if you don't respond, or like you seem distant, or it's like, no, you just don't get it. I'm not in the world you're in right now. Like, I'm in a different place. I'm unreachable, actually. It seems like you're reaching me. You're not. This ain't me. This is an automatic response, like, people
totally.
don't get it. So it's just so nice to hear you put it in such a beautifully eloquent way. It's like, because that's exactly what it is. It's true.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so true.
It's
So,
something that I've tried to get away from. Like, I reckon in some ways I'm like, nah, I don't know if that's healthy. I don't know if that's right. But when I go in there, it's something I also really enjoy. That there's a
bro,
release.
I
There's a
went the
release.
opposite, bro.
There's a release in
Yeah,
there.
I said, fuck that. I said, okay, I'm not gonna feel bad about this anymore. Everybody that gives me shit, no,
Yeah, yeah,
seriously, everybody
yeah,
that gives
yeah.
me shit when I'm doing that can fuck themselves. Literally, I don't like in the nice way. If you know, still love you, but seriously, fuck off if you're gonna get upset with me about this because this is what I was put on the planet to do.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. Like I feel so like almost militant about my practice that like there's very few things where I'm willing to just tell somebody to fuck right off, but like questioning my artistic practice or like my studio time or whatever, don't care, you know. But anyways, not to get off topic again.
I moved it in my house now, so I just do it kind of all the
Well,
time.
I'm in my
Yeah, I mean, I
studio
had
here.
a studio, but now I've kind of shifted down into here into a small workroom and then my living room where I'm working in, and it lets me work in an even more kind of relaxed and even deeper way again. I was a bedroom artist anyway. I liked being in the big studio, but I can break down the time barrier better here. Like when I really want to
I
go into
like both, man.
it.
I
Me
like
too.
both, but
Me too.
the living in the studio for me is essential, but also incredibly dangerous because I
Yeah,
just will like I get so caught up where I just will lose everything else. Nobody can get a hold of me all of a sudden, and like it's just you know I just get really into this studio grind. It's not a you know it's a grind because it's just like nonstop, and you get really stuck in the wheels of it. But
you got to
it's
dive in.
dangerous too because like
Yeah,
can't get out sometimes, man.
yeah,
It's hard
yeah.
to get out.
Yeah, you can trap yourself in there as well. You know what I mean. You can get into dead ends where you feel like you need to keep going, and you're just
Well, and when you
grinding.
want to escape the work, like what you said, if you're in a dead end and you're grinding and you want to get away from it, you can't. You're like, well, you just are like, you know, I have to take up certain exercises and running and going and doing certain things to leave the studio because it's like, well, I don't want to do this anymore, but my bed's right up there. And even if I just go up there, I'm going to see this every time I go to the fucking bathroom, you know,
Yeah,
like, and I don't
yeah,
want to. I can't see it anymore. I need to like fresh my brain. And that's when I get dangerous when you can't get that fresh refresher.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
when you go travel, right? That's when you go to Miami.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely, get out. Like I could do all my big, like, go walking. You know, mainly, but it's
Walking, yes.
and I think as well that what you're talking about comes over time as well in longer practice. You know, you can like when you're 17 to 20, 28, whatever, you just smash and go and go, and it's crazy. But if you're going to kind of make it work and have a life and try and be a decent adult as well, you've got to find those right balances in it beyond just tearing at it day and night, you know, all the time. That's good. It's great. It's got its place. Like we all need to do it when we're really into something as well. But in the long run, you're not going to be well if you don't find that balance and know when to kind of go deep and know when to kind of keep it a bit
Yeah,
easier.
all us
And
doers, we need that is that release valve. That's what I call it, at least, or whatever. Every once in a while, I need. There's multiple forms it takes. More destructive, some more destructive than others, but we all need a release valve of some sort. Otherwise, the work will go sour. It's
yeah,
true.
it
Like it
does. It
won't. You
does.
can't. Yeah.
It does.
So, um, I want to get back to your work again. You touched on something in the long talk before this rant was you touched on that between physical and digital and that interplay, how much you like that interplay between the two. Um, and I know that you've worked generatively as well, and that's pretty much the way that you work generatively to me probably is the most literal form of like organic and digital together. And I know that you're working on a project that furthers that even where it's like it's taking almost and I might be wrong even. So like we're gonna talk about this now. You're gonna school me. But it sounds like what you did before was actually use fungus to develop imagery by growing it organically, literally.
Yeah.
But now you're working on a generative project where you're using somewhat the organic algorithm, if you will, maybe of how fungus is generated, using these words kind of backwards and back and forth, how it grows, I guess, to create generations that are similar but completely synthetic.
Yeah.
So you can start back at the beginning of that project if you'd like and
Yeah.
explain it all, but
Yeah.
love to hear more about this.
Yeah. Definitely. So I'm going to be a little bit slinky on what I talk about with it. So I'm not going to say what the name of it is, and but I will say that it was a project done in a collaboration with a great friend of mine, a great artist who's also a very sort of sly fellow. He's great, and we we're playing around with lots of ideas. We're really good friends, and we hit upon this idea of basically growing the fungus that we take from the surface of major works of fine art, Matisse, Monet's, Picasso's, whatever, in major galleries. So we were like, yeah, we're going to go in, we're going to swab these paintings, and we're going to grow the fungus of them. And we started that.
Let me just stop you real quick. Did you actually do that?
Yeah.
You swabbed the paintings?
Yeah. So we go in and we contact swab the paintings. Yep. And we kind of
like illegally or like.
Yeah, no, there was no permissions. We just did this. Like the best
yeah,
way to do this is just to do it. So we kind of learned a lot about,
No, it really is, man.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes
sorry to interrupt. I just had to know because that's fucking great.
When I was working in the music industry for a little bit at Excel Records, they gave me my first space. There was a guy there called, actually, I'm not even going to say his name just in case, but he said, always do it until you can't get away with it anymore. He's like, never ask for permission. He's like, do it until someone says stop.
There's a famous, I don't know if it's a famous adage or if I don't know if it's a famous adage or not, but it's famous to me because when I heard it, I was just like, bam, and started living my life like it. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission.
Right.
Like,
I think we're putting it the right way. And anyway, he was the first guy to kind of instill that idea in me. And he was like, in the music business, that's what you do. So I always thought, okay, that's interesting.
And just to interject real here for everybody listening, this is just a little alpha for everybody listening. Same goes in art. Never, like, unless it's another artist's art, don't ask for permission for fucking anything. Just do your thing. If you have an idea, execute it, put it out in the world. If somebody comes to you and it's like, that's my shit, be like, oops, like, because it happens to me all the time. People take my shit and I'm just like, yeah, whatever, but yeah, copyright's a huge deal. Richard Prince is an artist that plays with this all the time, but anyways, just wanted to interject that.
Yeah, totally.
You agree, I'm sure, as well. Like, as an artist, we shouldn't be limited by law. And it's just like, in the post, if somebody comes to you and you agree, maybe then you find common ground. But as an artist, be an anarchist.
Yeah, I think so. I think
so. Like sweeping, like swabbing paintings to me is fucking amazing, dude. I fucking love that. Because if you would have asked for permission, it would have been years maybe before you might have been able to. Maybe, but they wouldn't have. But yeah, you don't think?
Yeah, totally. We'd never.
You're too much of a punk. They would have been like, nah, you fuck off. If it was like Anthony Kiefer or something, they'd be like, okay.
We come from the landscape of Banksy and of kind of British guerrilla art anyway, and that's all a part of that punk psyche. Everything, you do it. You don't. You get on with it. And you figure it out as you go along. Anyway, there's always trouble whether you try and do everything the right way. Anyway, so
it's a beautiful part of the story. It didn't mean to sidetrack you, but it's just a wonderful part of the story that was like literally just swabbing paintings. I love that. Okay, so you swab the paintings.
Yeah, so we thought, well, it's like a heist, we can kind of steal these paintings, we can take something from them. So we just took a photo.
You're literally taking DNA.
Literally taking it off of them, and it's fun. And fungus is everywhere all the time, so it was all an experiment about seeing what kind of grew off of those swabs and capturing them in a really interesting way. And this is a good sort of example of, I think, a fine conceptual art piece. It's something that's almost painfully obvious and is fun to do, but also catches people's imagination and their sense of mischief and what if, and also showing like things that are going on that you don't see all the time. And once we started kind of really capturing the fungus at this really fine details, it's really detailed. They're like these weird little mathematical, like generative freaks. They're all different. They all do different things. They fight, they interact. They have chaotic elements to them. They have very organized, structured forms to them as well. So all of this, and we quickly began to realize sort of Mother Nature is the original generative coder, and what you see in fungus growths is a lot like star formations or cosmic formations or so on. All these symmetries and these patterns of nature are like all through everything, echoed everywhere, and fungus just happened to really capture them in an amazing way and be ever present. They're one of the oldest kind of life forms. They're so important for everything. And there's
the largest life form on Earth is a fungus, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
It's under a continent or whatever. But I don't mean to sidetrack you at all, but like this is it. You were even early, I feel like, to the cultural right now mushrooms are huge, right?
Yeah.
Like in culture for some reason, well, not for some reason, but like the discovery of the communication through mycelium between all plant life, yada yada, discovering these giant organisms underneath continents that have been alive longer than anything else on the planet and all that. And the emergence of like Web3 and like this talk about mycelium and stuff has almost coincided in a way. And there's all these almost
Yeah.
analogies for one another within the two of like kind of what's happening societally and the way that we're connecting and trying to connect and the way that mycelium is. And it feels like we're learning a lot from mushrooms right now. It started, it seemed almost with more psychedelics and then spread out into like, they don't have to give you, you can learn a lot from these things, even, like maybe people were just mushroom fanatics because you could trip on them and it turned into more. But
I mean, there was the
either
argument
way,
where consciousness
well,
came from sometimes, as
well,
well.
yeah, I know. No, absolutely. What the stoned ape theory, right?
Yeah, totally. And
But
it's
yeah, yeah.
you
Have
you
you
obviously know
do
what
you
you're
know
talking about here, so it's nice to hear
do
it.
you
Yeah.
know Merlin Sheldrake? Or
No.
do you know of the author and like the researcher Merlin Sheldrake? He wrote a book about this called fuck, it came out maybe last year or the year before, and it was all about this. It was like
Right.
the definitive book at the time about like mycelium and like what's going on with this communication between plants and how they communicate where, like one tree needs more, nutrients, or like this tree's about to die. So it
Yeah.
will give up its nutrients actually. It's like I know I'm gonna die, and then they're all connected through this mycelium. And it was like just gives up, and like seeing how these organisms actually coexist with one another and all this shit. And like to me, that's with just in the last like 3, 4, 5 years of finding out about this and having my mind blown and be like, I think there's going to be more more sentience in trees and plants than artificial intelligence, than computers these days. Like I'm more interested in like that intelligence seems way more real. Obviously it is, than what people are considering the sentience of AI and stuff. So, anyways, I feel like these things are coincided, and you were just really early to that. It seems like really early.
I mean, it was myself and a guy called Mobster, a street artist called Mobster, and it was about 5 years ago now, because we basically had to learn how to become kind of microbiologists and build a laboratory that we could work in and control these specimens and work under like HEPA air
Wow.
filters, learn how to cast agar, learn how to
Yeah.
make mediums, like learn about pH, learn about everything.
Wow.
So there was a big learning curve, and it took us kind of most of a couple of years just to kind of get competent with the practice of like doing
Yeah, I
these
was just gonna say the learning curve. Like this is completely different. It's not just like a new artistic
hard work.
medium. It's like a yeah. Wow. Wow.
And it was where
So
you
how
could,
did you go about this?
well,
Yeah. How'd you go about the project? What was it? How
we
did this go
mixed
on?
we mixed scientific structures with art thinking. So we recorded all the, like what volumes, what mixtures, what's the output. Like we use proper scientific structures, this swab, that temperature, this output, that's good, review, like, change, cast it this way, try this. So we put scientific theory with kind of art, playful thinking. So scientific structure in the work, and then wishful kind of art thinking and art playfulness on the idea. So we'd never pretend to be scientists. That's a gross thing to do to a scientist. But we rode, and people do that, and I don't like that. We use the scientific structures to play with our art ideas. We are not scientists, and it's important to respect the difference, but we wanted to use scientific practice and mix art practice and playfully create a weird mutant freak that we could kind of do something really strange with, and show like discipline and proper like thinking and proper hard work, not just slapping something down and going, that's the feeling of happiness. We really wanted to kind of go, this is deeply conceptual art that we had to learn a lot to achieve and was extremely risky and difficult to do. And it was good. It was a successful kind of drop, and now we came into the space with it not really understanding the space. The NFT thing came around when we were well into the project. Suddenly realized, hey, we can put this out, because we had no way to put this out. There was no way to do anything with this project. We, like most of my work, we entered into purely on, hey, we can do this, let's do it. So we put the money together, and it costs a fortune to do all of this: time, money, space, equipment. Like, it's really expensive. And we went in there with absolutely no real plan for how to release this or anything. We just knew that we were going to do it, and we put everything we had into doing it, and and now, you know, I'm very pleased with kind of what we did. We had a great success with that project, and now the idea is I'm not going to say with who, but should we say a major generative art collective? I would say more than a platform, actually. We have the chance to kind of collaborate with creative generative coders and bring a new dimension to the work that really understands the space properly and builds on the value of the tokens that the existing holders have, lets them really use them, really interact with them. I mean, true utility. I don't mean like a silly kind of utility that gets knocked about. I mean, really like let people get their hands on stuff, you know.
Bro,
really
1 second. I'm so sorry. My computer is going to die if I don't plug it in. You're still in my ears, though. So 1 second.
I'll tell you what, I'm jumping out for 1 second. I'll be back in 1 second.
Okay. No, perfect timing.
I was just letting my girlfriend, he was knocking on the door, and, and there was kind of no way to do it without getting up. So I took that moment. It was good timing. I appreciate that.
Okay, perfect. Well, hopefully I'm not keeping you or anything from something.
No, don't be safe.
You good for another?
Yeah, okay, definitely. Absolutely.
So we were talking about the generative project, talking about now working on like the second iteration of this project.
Yeah.
My question was, this one's fully generative. There's actually no organic content being put into it. It's all going to be data based completely.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is all, we've not really announced anything yet. This is all very kind of tentative because there's a long road to get there yet. But
okay, we're speaking hypothetically, speculatively, speculative fiction here.
Exactly. So I always want to be very careful with expectations around projects as well. It's often best to say a lot less than say a lot more, especially early on. But the structure is there for this, and you know, if it comes together in the way we want, I think it'll be really, really good. You know, to do a fully on-chain, fully interactive, kind of really exciting, like new take on this project in another dimension. And I love the generative work that I'm seeing, and we felt that it is a generative conceptual art project anyway. So why not bring in a real twist? And you know, I like twists. I like performance art, and it is a performance work. So it's good to be surprising. So the idea is to be really surprising and go, you know, very much really exciting, beautiful code gen interactive art instead with it. But yeah, that's it.
Any idea when this is going to happen? I know like early days, everything's tentative, but are we looking like, you know, middle of next year-ish or something, sometime 2023?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, later half of 2023 is going to be realistic. You know, I think when, and it's funny as well, because people I think often don't realize the timelines that goes into putting really good projects together, and they can take, you know, it takes a long time. There's a hell of a lot that leads up to stuff. I've just on an edition for like 9 months, which is ridiculous in a way, but the closer you start to look, the more it opened up, and the more you have to keep looking sometimes until you think, yeah, it makes sense now. It all makes sense.
Yeah. Use that there, what you just said about working on a print or whatever, to parlay into that, because I wanted to know more. So this generative project you're working on, we're looking at late 2023. There's part of it kind of out there already, or like a first little bit or whatever, if you can figure it out or whatever. But that's all great. But what about in the meantime? What comes before late 2023 for you? What do you have going on? Holidays are coming up, so probably not much. But starting January and stuff. Do you have any shows in spring? Where will we see you? What do you got coming out? Where drops do you have going on?
Yeah, sure. I've not been really sort of too bothered with doing any shows a lot for a long time now. Weirdly enough, now with all the digital stuff going on more, I'm getting asked more to kind of put places a bit. But I think my main gallery, frankly, is the internet. Really, that's where people see it. But in terms of the drops, I've been putting together a good edition, like a really good edition, I think. And working with AOI and his team. I won't name all the individuals here, but not for lack of credit, but I'll do it properly on Twitter, and you can find sort of who I'm working with on that there. Icarus 4000, and it's great. They've been solving some amazing problems like true anonymous burn to claim mechanics. So even I don't know the wallet that's burning to claim that edition, and it's all encrypted and all fully on chain. So there's no messy like databases or secondary sellers. It's all direct and only with me, the artist. And these are new protocols that they're building for artists and brands and so on to engage with in the future as well. But getting the chance to kind of road test a lot of it for the first time with this drop. So there's, you know, I wanted to put out a physical edition, but whenever I was selling NFTs with physical pieces, collectors weren't really taking them up. I think more or less for their sense of anonymity and not sharing around their information easily. This solves a lot of that.
Totally.
This solves a lot of that problem. You know, so it's not just a physical piece. It's a truly kind of on-chain project where hopefully there's some basically cutting edge stuff going on, man, using new protocols to enter a blockchain and doing things what we think is the right way. Also real royalty pool that goes to even the screen printer I worked with. So I got her to set up a wallet. And even from primary, she's going to get a bit. Like everybody working on the project's going to have some stake in it. And I, you know, because I want to find constructive arguments for royalties, which I believe in. And I think if you're finally crediting and rewarding the people that work with you on projects as well, that's a good start. So it's you know, it's trying to do. First year was right, cool, I'm going to put out these NFTs and make really good visual art. This year I'm thinking now it's all about how I work with the blockchain and making really good visual art, but bringing essentially bespoke sides to projects as we go. You know what I mean? Like trying to
absolutely. I'm really curious if this is how are you implementing. Okay, so specifically I really like what you said about including the screen printer into a smart contract, because I have the same thoughts about like models using, or you know, like, oh, this model works with me, I would like to pay them. And I've thought already, I was in the middle of working on getting one of my model friends set up with a MetaMask account and all that to start paying him and all that shit and everything. So how did you do that? Because to me, it was like, I'll have to pay them on the back end because there's no way they're going to have like a super rare account and then whatever. So are you doing this on your own smart contracts on a private website that you're setting up yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
yeah, dude, that's awesome.
It's all kind of, it's sort of manifold being plugged into built protocols that are being made by certain individuals, all of which their names and information are kind of going to be fed out on my Twitter very publicly.
Yeah, sure. But
some of those
this
names
will be like on a .com then, or a .xyz or some
site
that you'll
awesome. Taking it off the platforms into a sort of under our own roofs, that kind of thing. And it's risky, you know, but it's important to do. And if
it's
you
risky, but it's necessary. I mean, it's where I want to go for sure.
Yeah, I think everybody's talking about sort of sovereignty and true independence and all that stuff. Well, you know, people need to demonstrate as much as possible.
Well, that's the only way to really do it. Like, we're still at the mercy of a platform, no matter which one of them it is, object, super rare, nifty, whatever, like, are still platforms that can still take your work down. They can still govern you. They can censor you if they want. Like, you're not in complete control. Like, that's,
we need to do our own stuff.
That's not yeah. Well, no, I mean, there's nothing wrong with those platforms whatsoever. But when it comes to self-sovereignty, if somebody wants to say that they're self-sovereign, but they make all their money through super rare, they are not.
Yeah.
You know, you're still reliant on a platform that can govern you to a degree. You know, we've seen it. People have gotten removed from super rare. If you can get removed, you're not self-sovereign.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I never used print sellers. I never sold my screen prints anywhere but on my site. Oh no, that's not true. I did very briefly sell one or two with one, but that was it. I learned my lesson, and I realized straight away that then I was taking the whole income. I could have a much more intimate kind of proper engagement with the buyer. You know, take the time to draw the tube, like write the address by hand, like on the tube ends, you know, make something that they really felt came properly from me direct. And when all this NFT Web3 stuff came around, I realized that there was another chance to build on that intimacy. Basically, you know, it's me and you, and that's it. There's some people around that are working with this, but there's no like piggy in the middle. And it's important to take that opportunity and to try and do things kind of properly in the Web3 space, I think. So yeah, give it a shot.
You think?
Let's try it out. But you know,
No, I'm with you, man. I love it.
yeah. So we're really trying with this and to use this to experiment with the technology for everyone's, from the developers to
So
mine.
like the print drop that you're talking about, being able to anonymously claim your print or whatever, did this happen already, or is this something that is coming up?
It's coming up, so it'll be, I mean, I'm hoping just before spring, spring 2023. So I would hope sort of March time.
So this is an NFT drop. Is it an edition or is it generative, or it's an edition? And it will limited edition. Do you know the number of the edition yet, or is that still too early even?
Yeah, no, 80. All the physicals made, all the screen prints made here. Yeah, 80 of them, and it's
there you have it.
Yeah, that's it. And it's, you know, I think it's as good as an edition as we can put together, and it's truly kind of on chain and
I've seen, you know, and it's not that much of a secret because you've posted process video on your page. If you want to do a little digging, you can go and see what this looks like. It is gorgeous shit. And I love that you gave it away. 80 pieces coming out early spring, maybe 2023. I mean, 80 is not a ton. 80 these should fly because the screen prints are so quality. I'm not exactly sure what the digital. No, it is. You did show me in Miami. Yes, you did. It's sick. Or maybe you sent it to me on WhatsApp. I don't remember, but yeah, cool. Okay, so there you go. There you have it, everybody that's watching. Be sure to get in on this. We definitely promote it and everything. What else, man? What else is going on? Do you have anything else you want to promote, or any anything else? Any project that we didn't bring up that you like want to give a little shine to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what, like I was saying, I'm spending so much time on calls at the moment, but what suddenly, kind of a bit unexpectedly, a big part of my practice seems to be becoming is talking to all these different kind of groups and developers and individuals out there. I'm really spending the time on talking to people and seeing what they're working on, what they're developing. AOI has been big in kind of helping me start to reach people, and Letitia's been bringing me into lots of conversations with some fascinating groups, from new technology developers to, I mean, all kinds of new tech. And what I'm beginning to see in like romping through these adventures, asking questions and talking to people, is how many interesting things are going on and how much potential there is for new ways for art projects to engage with the blockchain in basically what are experiments, you know. And that's a nice place to be, because you can try stuff out and be the first to be put into the scenario of, hey, this is what we've made, you know, here's someone using it. And that's cool. That's really cool. So that's kind of eating most of my time. You know, I used to be making a couple of sketches a day. The last like couple of months, I've been working in the evenings on pieces, and generally in the day, like in calls and
on calls, really,
and writing keynotes and like making notes and just looking at it all. So I'm trying to really understand technology at the moment again. It suddenly feels like there's all this new stuff, like just almost like came out of nowhere. And I feel like I'm just learning again, you know. So, and I realize if you want to get your head and shoulders sort of above everyone as well, and I mean that in the best way possible, I think it's good to be using stuff in ways that people aren't necessarily using it, and doing and going, hey, we can do this with this, you know, isn't that cool? And amazingly, there are some people willing to collaborate and let me use the incredible things they develop. More to the point, you know, it's great. So that's kind of really eating my time at the moment, but I'm really happy about it. If I'd known how much time I was going to be putting into all that stuff, I probably wouldn't have started. But once you get into it, you're just fascinated. I'm loving it.
Oh yeah, you would have. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean, man. I'm not in deep as you, but I'm working on a generative project right now too, and like the amount of like notes and detail work and stuff that I've been doing for it and everything. I was just gonna take a video. I'm like on the table right now of just like paper scraps, because just last minute it was like, can we get 5 more elements, because all my generative pieces are like hand cut collage elements that would be whatever, and they're like, well, let's get more pieces, and it's not just like well, let me like generate those or whatever, you know. It's like that means printing shit out, cutting it by hand and all this and that. But then also like thinking about the flexibility of each piece, what they do, actions, movement, like all this crazy stuff that goes along with thinking about generative art that I've never thought about before. So I think that you're probably a little deeper, you know, in it all than I am, but like I totally get this idea of just like a new way of thinking. And to me, that's the most fascinating and fun thing, like learning a new perspective. It almost is like learning a new way to think. And then once you catch on, there's nothing better, you know. It's like, well, it's like any skill, like you learn something and you catch on, you start feeling like you're gaining some esoteric knowledge or skill or something, you know. It's like, whoa. And then you start realizing like what I could do with this, you know. So I'm sure their mind just must be like
Yeah, nice.
expanding, and like the possibilities of the world are just increasing. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier too, about like those early days on the internet for us when we were kids. That same idea of possibility is like, that's why this feels like that, right?
Yeah, it's
Do
nice
you
to.
find that talking with these people is very similar or like easy? Is it like, the reason I ask is because talking to these generative coders has been so easy comparatively, like if I were to try to communicate some of the same artistic fundamentals to other creatives, like not that coders aren't creative, but communicating it in code is so much easier for some reason, it seems like. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's really nice to hear you talking about it, and you know, I'm pleased to know that artists like yourself take risks in going into those new areas. You know, especially where there's already other successful artists like rocking it. It's great to kind of
Well, I mean,
naively.
you're doing the same thing, man. Both of
Well, that's
us,
what I'm
man.
saying. And I
Yeah.
admire that, and it's something I think makes an interesting and dynamic artist, because you kind of have to ride in, and then once you start looking at it, you realize there's even more and more to understand and more to learn. And you know, at first I was quite nervous doing a lot of these calls, like you say, and but then as I began talking to people and talking to these developers and seeing what they were thinking about, I realized that freakishly there was these sense of like shared visions knocking about. It's almost like everyone knows what the elephants in the room are, and you recognize that a lot of people are really interested in like really breaking down a lot of these barriers and opening up the potentials for these new technologies, and that's really exciting. You know what I mean? It's like invigorating. So quickly I'm feeling like the technology utopias and the weird technological futures are opening up again for me, in a way that it felt when I first got on the internet. Like I feel that feeling again. I
Yep.
never thought I would feel that feeling again. I thought that feeling was gone. I liked the internet. I loved going through it, but at first, like, whoa, like you begin to see that world.
No, yeah, yeah.
And I kind of get that same feeling again now, and especially talking to all these incredible people making these unbelievable things. And those aren't words I particularly use lightly. Um, yeah, yes, I mean, mind blowing
I'm
is.
with you 100%, man. Before
is
before Web3 called me up, you know, I was bored, man. I was like, everything's pretty stale, I feel. I mean, we were in the pandemic pretty much and shit, so I mean, it was ultimate, but I think it just magnified just how like it felt like I was treading water, just like in whatever industry career I was in. It just felt really like I was aimless and nothing exciting was happening anymore. I've done everything that I could imagine I really wanted to and didn't get the fulfillment I wanted, whatever it was. And then Web3
yeah,
came and it was like, yeah, so I totally, bro, I'm with you 100%. We're lucky to have been there at the very beginning and then be here now, you know. Just another callback to the very beginning that, you know, both of us decades long, you know, creators, not just, you know, coming up on the scene now. We could speak forever, bro. Like I really, really love you as a friend, man. Like I'm so happy that we got to meet in person early in London earlier this year,
me
and
too.
Miami. We spent a lot of time together and just have the best time. We have
Uh,
about like 10 minutes left before this needs to cut off, and that's the only reason I'm ending this is so that we can keep this nice and tidy. Don't have
okay,
to separate it up into two. But
yeah.
here's going to be the closing question that I wrote down earlier. Not many people not many people that I would ask this to because I wouldn't give a shit. But you have a good taste in these things. What are your favorite album covers? Like
Oh,
of not
wow.
Yeah. Like more of
Yeah, do
like
you know
more of
what? I
your
could have.
era. I don't want to hear like the Beatles, bro. I don't want to
No,
hear
no,
that
don't
shit. I
worry, you
want to
won't
hear
get.
like
Do you know what? It's funny that. Do you know what I could have done with a bit of preempting with it? I could have got them ready from the piles
you
behind me.
didn't done the show.
Yeah, I could have had them. The trouble is, if I start to look now, I'm going to need about half an
Yeah, I
hour.
know. No, trust me. I know.
Uh,
I know.
okay,
I
so
know.
there was some really playful ones that I loved. I mean, one of the ones I loved was a record called Asen, Trip to the Moon, and it's like a hardcore rave record from '91. Asen, Trip to the Moon, and the kind of outer sleeve
How do
is
you
all
spell
the
ASIN?
ACEN and Trip to the Moon.
Got it.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and the artwork is like a kind of proper rough outer space dots. And in the center on the vinyl, he just has the world, really kind of low, nicely done, a few colors, almost like a screen print. And that visual of it always really killed me. I loved that. I thought that was great. I just the feel of it and it being a late night kind of rave record, and like it's so much fun. What else? I mean, one of my favorite ones, of course, was
Oh yeah. I'm looking at it now. I can see why. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's such
Well, dude. Of course. This makes so much sense. You want a
it's a
little
great
glimpse
one.
into inspiration? Like this is, this goes along with your work. I can see it.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
so
It's
funny. The reason or album art is so interesting to me because like it can change and morph like when you listen to the music then too in relation to the cover and all of a sudden like this cover that at first was just like why the fuck like that's so odd and then all of a sudden it's just like that's the greatest fucking thing ever after like a while. I love
yeah.
album art. Okay, so anyways, more.
And another one of I was actually going to do like a version of this, and obviously credit, but Cybotron Enter. I think it's Enter the album.
Cybotron.
Cybotron Enter. Yeah, that's it. That cover, man, that cover blew my mind when I saw it when I was young. And they'd actually done a cover of one of my dad's band's records and sort of nicked the rhythm track and then built a really early Detroit record. And it's considered to be like the first Detroit techno electro kind of record. And it's a copy of Mr. X, Alleys of Your Mind. And that cover, that guy leaping through the kind of square, and I can see that they've rephotographed it on like a CRT, like an analog CRT, like I like to use, and then pasted it all on top by hand and worked it. Like I love that cover, and that came out in 1983 or 4 or something, I think.
This is
And
from 1983 or 4.
I think so. Yeah, that's about right. That's it. Yeah, and man, I just thought that was like blinding. It had so much power. It was fast. There was the 2 dimensions, the kind of cut figure breaking through that
Yeah, man, I'm a little blown away looking at this right now.
Wicked. It's really strong, really strong.
How's the album?
Oh, it's great. It's sort of early pioneering kind of Detroit electro. Alleys of Your Mind is the tune to really check out on it. Super dark. It's great. It's like it's really dark, really moody, and I love it. That one for me is a killer. That's just.
Well, I'm gonna listen to that one for sure. I'm so glad I asked because that's a perfect because that fucking cover, man. I mean, it looks like it looks like you could do your version of that pretty simply. Like that's clearly inspiring your imagery. Yeah, it's so fucking on point. So Cybotron Enter, man, I'm gonna listen to that today. That's a perfect ending, man. That's a cool cover, and it's so like both those covers make your artwork. Like I could do the same. I could do the same thing with certain album covers. I could probably put together 4 that you'd be like, yeah. So
send them to me.
I'm so glad I asked that.
Yeah, pleasure.
Fair enough.
Thanks very much,
Jesse. You don't really have anything to promote? Absolutely, man. Dude, thank you for having us. I'm super happy to have you in the Fakewhale family, to be minting you into the vault. When this comes out, I think will actually come out like the day before fucking Christmas or some shit like that. So
Merry Christmas.
What a Christmas gift to everybody. Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody. You get to listen to me and John Karborn. Follow Karborn on Twitter, on Instagram. Pay attention for the Fizzy Digi drop next spring. Anything else, John, in closing? Want to say anything?
No, that's it. Thanks very much. There's kind of nobody better to chat shit with, really, Jesse. You're brilliant, and I've really enjoyed watching you come out as a kind of public speaking figure as well. It suits you, man. Good for you.
Who would have thought, man? Who would have thought? I was such a studio rat and so hermetic for so long. I wouldn't even show what I looked like, and now here I am. But
Yeah.
when I get to do an interview with you, it makes it such a pleasure because I was excited all morning to get to chat with you, and I leave these conversations so inspired. Yeah, man, it just really thank you so much, man, for everything. Honestly, over the past few months and everything, Miami was such a blast hanging out with you and everything. I won't gush on and whatever. Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you, John
Thanks,
Karborn,
thanks, Jesse. Hey, Sky Golf, all the guys.
Thank
you, guys. Nice one.
Yeah, and shout out to AOI and Letitia, by the way, because that's kind of
everyone,
got to out there.
Everyone working with me, Bannock, Mobster, all the guys. Love you, Mum.
Peace.